everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, and this week I am not joined by Derek Brissett. He left a note, something about making a trip to Monaco, something Ferrari, something girlfriend. You know, I'm sure it'll sort itself out. However, I am joined by the MLR stats man himself, James Deeley. James, thank you for joining me.
Stuart, thank you for having me. I'll step in for the as the Rouge Rugby substitute once again.
Always grateful to have you here. So the MLR 2024 season, we're getting towards the end of it now. I think every team has played 12 games at the point of us recording.
Yes.
So we're in like the final stretch now, the final few rounds to really confirm like the playoff places. Obviously, you know, with the absence of the Arrows and you taking on the Chicago Hounds as your adoptive team.
Certainly am.
How have you found the season gone so far?
I think as Canadian rugby fan, especially one in Toronto, it's you cannot understate how much you miss having a team in your own backyard. It's so hard to support a team from afar, especially from a different country. It's difficult, but because I'm such a fan of the league and I'm so invested, I'm making do, and I'm following the Hounds this year, hopefully as they push for their first playoff berth. It's a funny old season, I think. Quite a few teams have taken a step back from where they were last year. One team especially has taken a step forward, Houston. And I'm waiting to see how much drama this new 8-team playoff race kind of generates. Obviously, the top 4 from each conference go through, and I want to see how much drama that generates within the last 4 weeks of the regular season. We know one place, and we know one team has been eliminated, but other than that, it's all up for grabs. So we'll see going into the round 15 of the regular season here.
Yeah, because unfortunately, last season the Arrows were the first team to be confirmed as not reaching the playoffs. Obviously, different structure, so different mechanics of like how far they could go anyway, but still, bottom of the league, bottom in the Eastern Conference. But let's talk about Anthem for a moment, because we mentioned back when it was like the 5th or 6th round of MLR 2024, we said that Anthem, their losing streak was clearly noticeable, especially as the team was created specifically for USA Rugby to address issues. And it's like, they've got a lot of issues, especially if they only got what I think is like 6 total points on the table.
They have 6 points. Yeah. The thing is, I even made a video about this in the off season in the 3 weeks of the off season we had between Anthem being announced and the season starting, about like what this is going to be and what to expect from this. And it was like, they aren't going to win many. I said maybe they'll win a game. A dream would be 2 games. Like, no one should be expecting these guys to come in and juggernaut the entire league. Well, the idea is it's an 8-year project to 2031.
Yeah.
But that's 2 whole World Cup cycles essentially they have. So they have plenty of time. They're developing Eagles for 2031. They don't need to rock the entire league in their first season, especially given they had 3 weeks.
Yeah, that was something else we mentioned of the very short turnaround. Because again, going back to the Arrows, when they got confirmed for the league, it was November of 2018, and their first games were in January of 2019, and that was a short turnaround period. But it's nothing compared to what Anthem have had to do, as well as the fact that a lot of the guys that joining Anthem weren't like the first choice picks from other teams. They were like third choices,
fringe players.
Exactly. So, obviously with a bit more time, a bit more leniency to get players in, a full off season to plan ahead.
Absolutely. And I mean, these guys might not be fringe players if they're given enough time against professional opposition, which is the point. So I don't think we should be too hasty in judging this little experiment. As you say, the Toronto Arrows were announced in November to play in January, and that was quite short. Bear in mind, RFC LA this year were basically revealed in at Christmas, and we thought that was quite short. Whereas Miami, also an expansion team, believe it or not, even though they feel like they've been around forever, were announced kind of midway through the 2023 season.
Yeah.
We knew they were coming. They had a lot more time to prepare. Now, right now, they're sitting in the middle of those three expansion teams on 21 points behind RFC LA's 27, but they're both competitive teams. I mean, Miami beat the reigning champions.
Yeah, that's something else I wanted to move on. The two other new teams, well, new with an asterisk for LA.
I'm treating LA as a completely new franchise. That's
Yeah,
what I'm doing for my stats.
I see where you're coming from on that, and I know that like technically it is still the same team. They've just relocated. To which my response is, okay, tell that to the fans in Atlanta who no longer have a team in nearby proximity to support. But we've also had the expansion draft for Miami as well, and you know we've had the slow drip information. We even had during the off season like, oh, this is a potential ground that we could play at, and you know, showing us videos of different areas. Obviously, they went with the same facilities that Inter Miami are using at the moment.
Yeah,
and you know, and there's always the possibility that when Inter Miami move into their, you know, proper stadium, it could be that I always want to call it like the Drive Pink Stadium, but I know it's like changed its name since then.
It's the AutoNation Sports Field, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean the stadium next to it, like the big.
Oh, the MLS stadium.
Yeah, so because it's technically a temporary venue, but it's been a temporary venue for like the past 4 or 5 years at this point. So
yeah.
But you know, always the possibility of that's a location for an MLR final because it has the facilities to do so. But anyway, the point in getting away from me. You know, we're seeing that the Sharks at the moment are currently on the cusp of making the playoffs. I think they're very close with DC.
They were until this weekend.
They were
unfortunately,
until the weekend.
They got trucked by LA, ironically. Quite badly, more worse than I expected, that's for sure. So they sit 9 points back with 4 games to play. So they got some work to do, unfortunately.
Okay, so looking at the standings at the moment, the only team that's mathematically confirmed is Houston, who, you know, I said in my top 5 or top 6 of the league at that point is that Houston, having Poke Human as their head coach, having Henke Meyer come in as director of rugby, and it was always the idea of this is the long-term plan. It's going to take a few seasons. And now that's finally coming to fruition. We're seeing it with Houston, 11 wins, 1 loss, trying to rival San Diego's record from last season, hoping also to go 1 better and lift the MLR
1 point
shield.
better even would do it.
Yeah, exactly. But let's look at like some of the other teams because the West is doing very strong at the moment. Like Seattle and San Diego are both technically ahead of the defending champions New England. So what do you think it is about the West that has really strengthened this year?
You see, that's an interesting question because two of the teams at the top of the West, the Seattle Seawolves and the San Diego Legion, have taken huge steps backwards compared to their last season performance. San Diego were 15-1. They're 8-4 right now. They can go a maximum of 12-4, which is, I mean, that's a great record, but it's not 15-1.
Yeah, that's true.
Seattle, I think, overshadowed by San Diego last year. I think were 14-2.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're 9-3. Now Seattle have a bit of an asterisk next to them because they have so many injuries to some seriously crucial players. Charles Elton, Rickard Hatting, among the main ones there.
Yeah, the press release had like 4 players?
5 players had season-ending injuries.
Worse than I thought.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, they picked up Monate Akui, who I think was great last year, and he got he was a first 15 selection in his debut and scored. It looks like Devin Short might be coming eventually. So they've got some back row coverage there after Kara Pryor and Rickard Hatting are out, but they've had unfortunately some injuries. I think both of those teams could. I think it's possible for them to clinch this weekend, but we'll see if they do it or not.
Yeah.
Now, your question as to why the West seems to be going so much better than the East is quite a tricky one as well. The New England Free Jacks also seem to have taken a bit of a step back, also hampered by some serious injuries. Vian Conradi, John Poland, Potros was out for a bit, Reese McDonald was out for a bit. They've had some setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Nola Gold still seem to be a little bit inconsistent.
Yeah.
They had a few weeks off, and then they've returned to their normal form, which was quite terrifying for a few weeks. Now, Nola Gold fans might be a bit concerned because Ed Fidel went off in the first minute against Houston.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's all right. DC also seem to have taken a little bit of a step back, although how much was that step back really? They qualified for the postseason last year with a negative record.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think Chicago may have taken the biggest step forward in the East anyway. And even they have a 5-6-1 record at the minute, so no, they don't. There's no real convincing team in the East, apart from the New England Free Jacks, who are also always going to be strong. They're the reigning champions.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually I haven't done the maths on it, but I don't know if the West is as dominant this year as it was last year. I think the gap might have actually closed a bit.
Okay, all right. I think it's just from like a comparison point when you look at Houston that are currently on 52 compared to New England who are on 40,
and that's quite stark.
Yeah, because
that is a big difference.
Yeah, because I think New England would be third if they were in the Western Conference at the moment. Yeah.
Only on points difference, they'd be level with San Diego.
Yeah. But that's a couple of teams in the East that you mentioned, Chicago and Old Glory. They're both on 30 points each at the moment. Chicago ahead on point difference. Nola Gold on 34. So, that second place for potential home conference semi-final in the playoffs is still up for grabs.
Yeah, and that would be valuable money to teams that are struggling to get by. Like, that's important.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I guess you'll be hoping that Chicago can host that at SeatGeek, and
Yes, I was there at the final last year. I love SeatGeek. It was really good fun. I haven't actually seen Chicago play there, mind you.
That's true. Two other teams that are currently on equal points is Utah and LA, both on 27, and again Utah ahead on point differential. 6 points back from Dallas, so still some work to do if they want to claim, if either team want to claim the final playoff spot in the West. But that said, Dallas doing much better than previous years. Utah, I have to say, is one of the standout disappointments I've seen.
It is. They missed out by, I think, a point or two last year on the playoffs to Houston. And this year, I'm not quite sure what it is. They just can't seem to get it together. They're kind of, while Nola is more kind of week to week inconsistent, the Utah Warriors are half to half inconsistent.
Yeah.
They'll score. Sometimes they'll score 20 points in the first half and none in the second. Sometimes it'll be the other way around. And you can't win games if you're playing 40 minutes. It's really, really strange because they do have a strong team. They've got Michael Manson, who's been an absolute stud for them this year, and Dylan Nell, who's unfortunately suspended right now, which won't do them any good, and Frank Lacour. Like, they have some real talents there, but they can't seem to get it to click. And they're going to have to if they want to catch the Dallas Jackals, who are, as I think they said on the broadcast this weekend, it was the best 5-7 team in the league, which I think is fair. I don't think they've lost heavily. Full stop, that I can remember anyway. They've always been very narrow defeats.
Yeah.
And I think they're the most fun to watch from a neutral perspective because you never know what you're going to get. They have scored the most tries in the league, which is a standout stat to me.
Yeah.
They have scored 52 tries, more than anyone else in the league, more than Houston.
Only by one,
but more than Houston.
Yeah,
and look above them with San Diego. San Diego is 7 points above them, but they've only scored 35 tries.
Yeah,
it's weird. I hope the Dallas Jackals can squeak in because I think they deserve to more than Utah and LA.
All right. Okay, so we're a Canadian rugby podcast. I think we should focus on some of the Canadian players that are in MLR at the moment. We have some familiar names in New England, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
The Canadian contingent essentially being the bulk that helped them lift the shield last year. But yeah, has there been any standout player from the Eastern Conference so far?
Well, I think I'll just give a little shout out to Ben Lesage over in New England, because he captained the Free Jacks the other day for the first time. So another Canadian captaining the Free Jacks, Josh Larson.
Yeah.
But right now, what stands out is there's quite a there's two Canadian players that are going for the Ironman, but they're both in the West, so we'll come on to that a little bit later.
All right.
Yeah, so Ethan Fryer is Canadian, and shout out to him for his first MLR try. Well, second MLR try, first try of the season, within a great interception against the Dallas Jackals. But yeah, a few of these guys are pretty household names for MLR fans. Ben Lesage is the top in meters gained in the Eastern Conference for Canadian players on 399, and Andrew Quattrin is right behind him on 395. Both of those players have scored 4 tries each, and Josh Larson, also New England, is still the second highest Canadian tackler in the league.
Okay.
I don't remember the last time he played, but it's been a few weeks.
Yeah. And you're mentioning there's a couple of guys going up for the Ironman title in the West. We have to, now, unfortunately, we have to exclude Houston at this point, because technically they don't have any Canadians on their roster. So, I'm just saying, when we get to the playoffs, that's the most important statistic you need to have, because
it is. It's the
every
tiebreaker
team that wins is the team with the most Canadians. But
it does seem like no one's been told the rules, that if it's a tie after 80 minutes, it goes to the team with the most Canadians.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't know that.
It's one of those new rules that World Rugby threw in.
Yeah, just under the radar
there. So who are the Canadians that stand out to you in the Western Conference?
Well, they're both. I'll start with the two that are currently still up for the Ironman, which is my little award for players that appear in every single game their team plays in a season, and they are Dewald Kotzer, who also leads the league in tries scored, pretty much on the back of that 5-try monster performance he had a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And personal favorite of mine, Mitch Richardson.
Yes.
Started 12 games of 12 so far, and he's on just shy of 500 meters gained, so that would be quite nice milestone for him. But also in the West, which I think is he kind of goes under the radar because he plays on the opposite wing of Andrew Coe, who is a stud. Jack Shaw is having a pretty monster season again. He started 11 of these games. He scored 4 tries, and I think he scored one against Miami the other day.
Yeah, so I think that, obviously, because it's a relocation, a lot of familiar faces with Atlanta are with LA as well. So it seems to be more of a continuation just on the Pacific coast instead of the Atlantic. There's a few names that I feel like have been missing, but have now come into the fold now that I don't know like the reasoning behind it, but Justice Duru wasn't available or wasn't playing in the first half of the season for San Diego, but now he is, and that's great to see. But yeah, as you said, I think Mitch Richardson, we've had him on the pod just before the season started, and he's been doing great. Won his 50th MLR cap as well, so congratulations, Mitch. And Seattle, who have been I've had more Canadians than other years. We have Reed Watson Davis. He's been getting a few starts as well, which is always good to see. And Utah have had a number of Canadians signed or announced a few of them, but haven't always been playing them. I think
none
that's
of them
the reason
really,
why they're number 5.
It's strange with the Utah Warriors. I don't know if the likes of Spencer Jones and Tyler Wong are injured, or if they are not being selected for another reason. I'm not quite sure, but it does seem kind of strange because Spencer Jones was great with New England. He was great with the Arrows, and I thought Tyler Wong was really good last year with the Arrows. on a team that had quite a few and far between bright spots. But I liked Tyler Wong last year. It's just he hasn't had much game time this year.
Yeah, it's a bit disappointing. And if they want to reach the playoffs, Utah, you know what to do. You got to get that Maple Leaf represented. The Utah colors are red and white. You're already halfway there. May as well just go the full hog. So at the moment, the playoff picture looks to be, if the league was to stop today and move straight into the playoffs, Houston versus Dallas, Seattle versus San Diego, New England versus DC, and NOLA versus Chicago.
That is 3 prime rivalry matchups.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and also NOLA versus Chicago.
Yeah. But I mean, we have another Texas tumble between Houston and Dallas. We have, the evergreen oldest rivalry in MLR, Seattle and San Diego. We have the colors of the flag in New England and DC.
Red, white, and blue off. Yeah.
Yeah. And NOLA and Chicago are there. So
yes. That'll be the first playoff games for both teams. We can just run with that.
Yeah. And this would also be Dallas's first entry into the playoffs as well. So
certainly would, and I'm sure they are the fans down there are absolutely gunning for it.
Yeah, and if you can have a Texas Cup match to determine who makes it to the conference final, I think you're basically printing money at that point.
That would be great. You could arrange, it's only a little drive down the highway. You could have an away fan road trip and everything.
Yeah, I think I'm hoping it comes together, and well, I'm saying that you never know what's going to happen in the final 4 rounds, and this could all be completely different by the time we come to the playoffs.
Certainly could.
Picture. Yeah, but all the best to all the teams involved. Definitely looking forward to it. The one thing I do want to mention is that there does seem to have been more cards this year, and I think that's mainly down to LA.
They
more cards and hallmarks at this point.
They've tidied it up recently.
Yeah.
But it was getting stupid. They were in high teens, 14, 15, 16 cards by week 9, week 8 even. It was getting crazy. They were getting to the point where it was a surefire kind of they'll be down a man for half an hour.
Yeah.
It was really getting weird. But I think you are right. It does seem like there's more cards this year, and the disciplinary panel has been going off on it. There seems to be a lot more yellow card accumulation suspensions than previous years. And not sure if there's any correlation between this or not, or whether it's just something that is not actually true but feels true, is there seems to be a higher number of season-ending injuries this year than previous.
Yeah, it does feel as though there's been a lot of press releases coming out saying certain players won't be available, but cheering on from the sidelines. Again, we haven't been keeping the metrics on that, so not entirely sure.
That might be an idea for something though. I could look into that.
Yeah, and definitely something to do in the off season. All right, now, so we've been talking about MLR. Let's talk a bit more about some Canadian rugby news, because we have some highs and we have some lows, unfortunately.
Yes.
When it comes to sevens. So in Madrid this past weekend was the grand final of the Sevens series. The women were in the championship playoff, and the men were in the relegation playoff. And now, irritatingly, they didn't announce what the format was going to be prior to the weekend itself. So they said, teams are going to be in a pool, and these are the teams that they're going to have. It's like, okay, now what? Now what happens from here? How do we get this? How are we supposed to see how this all unfolds?
Well, it clearly wasn't the team with the most Canadians.
Yeah, unfortunate. Well, for the men especially, and this, to be honest, this whole season has been pretty abysmal for the men. I think they only got victories in Cape Town, and they've lost every other game since. So
yeah, I think I saw somewhere it was like a 3 for 36 record across the season.
Yeah, it's
pretty dire.
That is pretty dire. So the way it worked was you would have pools and with 4 teams, and those pools would play against each other. So Canada was in a pool with Uruguay, Germany, and the old rivals, the USA. So on the Friday, Canada played Uruguay and lost 41-7. Then they played against Germany and narrowly lost 19-14. And then for the final pool game on the Saturday, they played against the USA, and that was surprisingly the closest game. USA 14, Canada 7. And the way it worked is that they were in Pool A, and the other teams in Pool B would then get a final rank. So Canada in this case were A4, and they would then play the top team in Pool B, which was Spain. And as a result, they played against Spain, and this was essentially a winner take all scenario. It was a case of whoever won these games would then make it to the 2025 season of the Sevens. So we had USA playing against Samoa. USA got through. Germany fell to Kenya. Uruguay narrowly beat Chile by 2 points. And finally, Canada versus Spain. This was the only matchup which had two of the core teams playing against each other. Final result: Canada 14, Spain 22. The Canadian men are out of the sevens. And there's already been a press release come out from Rugby Canada saying how disappointed everyone's feeling.
It does say
Yeah,
something that I think this is the first I've heard from the new Rugby Canada CEO, and it's just
yeah,
saying we're disappointed.
yeah,
It's like it
and
it it's
the
pretty much
players are
sums everything up.
disappointed as well. Yeah, it's
Of course, the players are disappointed.
yeah, as in I'd be shocked if they weren't.
Yeah,
But yeah, I feel as though this is, something that has been an issue for the entire season. Obviously with the Olympics coming up, this is where the start of like changeovers are going to be announced. For example, the women's sevens have already announced that Jack Conradi is leaving as head coach and is to be replaced by Jocelyn Barrio, who is like one of the assistant coaches at the moment. She'll be moving into the head coaching role following the Paris 2024 Olympics. But for the men, we haven't heard anything at this point.
well, quite a I've got the statement up here from Rugby Canada.
Yeah,
I might as well read it out. We commend the efforts of our players and coaches who have given so much for the Canadian cause. We are all deeply disappointed with the result over the weekend, and no one more so than our players.
yeah,
It's fine. But I think quite a telling thing is we are all deeply disappointed with the result over the weekend.
not this
So they
season.
they were fine with the rest of the season because it's been
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah. It also is mentioned in the statement that the sevens will return to Vancouver in 2025. So the men qualifying isn't, contingent for Vancouver to host the sevens, which is great to see. They're also trying to ensure a format that will include the men's team playing at BC Place. We'll hear more information about that. But yeah, the men will be entering the Challenger Series for 2025. The women, on the other hand, were, as with the 15s, phenomenal. I say as with the 15s, a lot of 15s players from the Pacific
One
4 series
squad,
came
right?
over. So yeah, doing incredibly well. In their pool stages as well. Losing to the USA to begin with, but then picking up a couple of victories in the second day. So a victory over Great Britain. And then we move on to the semi-finals, where Canada narrowly lost to France. And then they faced New Zealand, who they did beat in the pool stage, but unfortunately couldn't do the double, losing narrowly 26-14 to finish fourth overall. Very commendable result.
And season.
Um, yeah, and season. Well, to get into the challenge, the champions playoff, yeah, obviously had to be good this
Exactly.
season. Exactly. All right, and now, speaking of Vancouver, we're just going to give a bit of an update on the Vancouver Highlanders. They've made additions to their reserve squad, including Tom Richardson and Connell Henchy. So those guys adding to the reserve squad. And, it's not long now until the very first games of the Highlanders series taking place at the end of June, that double bill against Barbados and the Canada Selects. So hoping we can watch that.
Henchy is a brilliant name for a rugby player.
Yeah, fantastic. But we're still near like a month away from those games. But if you want to watch any rugby this weekend, the MLR is still available on the Rugby Network, as are the semi-finals of the Premiership Women's Rugby. And on Sportsnet, you can find the Premiership Final and the URC quarterfinals taking place. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more, as well as our written pieces on our website, rougerugby.ca. You can also find the podcast on Spotify, S4P, and Apple Podcasts. We have our YouTube channel at The Rouge Rugby. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, all at The Rouge Rugby. James, where can people find you and your stats knowledge?
So I am primarily on Instagram at MLR Stats, MLRSTATS, and on Twitter at my personal Twitter at JamDelay. I post everything to both places. Come find me. Come look at it. Come look at numbers.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. James, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby Podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.